It's funny, but I've been getting some requests, people asking me like, who am I? Like, like what's my backstory? So in this video, just going to share a little bit about, I guess, how it all happened for me, right? And what got me there and how you can also get there. So the truth is, right, I'm not special at all. I'm just like you, and we're all the same, right? And we share a love for music and life, but I guess the only real difference is, or perhaps you've got this too, but I am an optimist, and by believing something is possible, it becomes probable for me. So that's something I'm really into, actually. But I guess what happened, so here's the thing, right? I was a kid, fresh out of school, and I feel a bit awkward actually talking about myself like this, but here's the deal, right? So I was fresh out of school and I was clubbing, right? I was going clubbing every single weekend. I felt like a real affinity with it, and to be honest, when you go to clubs for the first time, you might not see it, but if you go enough, you realize there's a scene. There's scenes, and I got into a scene, and I knew all the people that went to these clubs every single weekend, and I was going there every weekend for a couple of years. And after a couple of years of going to these clubs, then all of a sudden they stopped. Okay, now this is back 20 years ago, right? So what happened was, especially our school was doing this, but what happened was, the people running the events just stopped it. But back then, right, there wasn't any social media or anything like that. So how people advertised their club events was through like street press magazines. So there was free like music magazines that were in like video shops and music shops, clothing shops. And if you wanted to go out, you just get one of these free street press things and have a look. So what happened, because there was no social media, the people running the clubs, right, these group of promoters, they had no way of announcing it and letting people know that they weren't running their events anymore. And they weren't going to take out an ad to let people know that. They were just taking a break. And I didn't know any of this. So I was just like looking through the street press, and all of a sudden the events in this scene that I was in, there was nothing for them. And so after about 6 weeks of like looking through the street press every week and having nowhere to go, all of a sudden these ideas came, and the ideas were like, well, there's a gap in the market, you know what I mean? Maybe I could start my own nightclub, because I'll be honest, my identity was caught up in going to these events, and now I had nowhere to go. So what I did was I thought, what would be involved in running a club event? And I basically put together a little to-do list. I've always been into my to-dos, and I thought, what would be involved? And so, yeah, I put together a kind of idea. And then the first thing was, okay, let's go find a venue. Well, let me find one. So what happened was I'd always seen it's King's Cross, like in Sydney, right? It was a big clubbing kind of district for a while there before the governments came in to do these regulation things recently. But forget that, like, 20 years ago, it was big, right? So it was King's Cross in like Sydney. And so what happened was I always saw this club there, and I was up this dark alley, okay? And I thought to myself, it always looked really, really cool. And I didn't know anything about that venue. And it was the first venue I went for. I just had this intuition to contact them. Now at the time, right, I didn't know, I only found this out later, but there was this whole movie that's kind of like, this show Underbelly about this guy, right? I won't mention his name on the video, but it was like King of the Cross or whatever, and he was this full gangster guy, like, and to be honest, he never really had any time for me or anything like that, like none of those big gangster people did. But what happened was, I didn't know this, but that was his first ever club, and someone had just been killed there in some drive-by shooting. I was like, not drive-by shooting, some bikers had come in or something, someone had been killed there anyway. And anyway, so no other promoters were reluctant to work with them. So obviously there was an opening, and I just went in as some kid, and they probably saw me as no threat at all, but the person that managed the venue there, they actually kind of like I guess took a liking to me a little bit. This guy became a little bit of a father figure, a little bit of a mentor to me, right? This manager. So what happened was he gave me a shot, and I was actually right? What happened was there was a gap in the market for that scene. I took out a full page ad, I came out hard, right? And all of a sudden those events took off very, very quickly. And I'll be honest, my event there, that first event I ever ran, started in January 1999. It ran at that venue every single Friday night for 7 consecutive years. And it was big. And then what happened was, and it got big. And I'll be honest, yes, there was gangster activity, and sometimes bikie gangs would come into the club and stuff, but it wasn't to cause trouble. It's just that was part of that scene. There's probably drug deals going on, all kinds of things probably. But anyway, they were always good to me. They really were. They was nice to me. And at the end of the 7 years, it's not like they kicked me out because they were like, oh geez, your event's not going good. What happened is there was some business deal. Someone came in with lots of money, wanting to renovate it and wanting to turn it into their thing. So they said, man, we loved working with you, but that's how it is, man. You got to find another venue. And at that time, I was heartbroken. I was like, oh no, I've lost my venue. You know what I mean? And I didn't know that at the time that I could just find another one. I was like, oh my God, what am I going to do? But then what happened was it actually ended up working out really well for me, because then I moved out of this dark alley, right, and I got this venue right opposite this big Coca-Cola sign in the heart of the Cross, like the King's Cross Hotel. This is back before the renovation happened recently. And what happened was we went into a prime position, and all of a sudden I went from getting like 500 crowds to getting like 1,000 crowds, and all of a sudden it just took off for me. And then all of a sudden, then my partner got involved at one point. Like, well, then we fell in love, right? And then what happened was she's actually very smart. And so what happens is we then together, right, then expanded it out big time. And then I had events down the whole east coast of Australia. But the reason I'm saying all that is, like, to be honest, I DJ'd at all the events, and the reason I did that is probably because I had control freak issues, right? So I had a very clear vision of what I wanted, and to trust that out to other DJs, I felt was a bit of a risk. So I taught myself how to DJ, and I guess I kind of had the clubs, which was really lucky for me, because then I could put myself on playing most of the nights, and I could figure it out by actually playing live. So I was actually the main DJ behind those events. Sure, later on, as the events expanded, I had to take on more DJs. But, you know, I was pretty much training up my friends and stuff like that, and people that I knew I wanted to work with. And so what happened was, but the reason I say that is because I've got a lot of experience DJing. I'll be honest, like I DJ'd, we got to a point there at the end where I had sort of like, 3 events, like, per state in 3 different states, right? So there was a lot of events, and it was a really good life, actually. I was flying around between these parties. But so I got a lot of experience DJing, and I'd like to think that the fact that the events were so successful maybe has some kind of testament to my ability to DJ and read a crowd as well. So it's not just skills, it's about reading the crowd and playing the right kind of music for those scenes. But then also, so I've got it from that point of view, but mainly I've got it from the point of view of the promoter, okay? And the promoters are the people that actually run the club. So I don't own the club. See, how it works with the promoters is, let's say you wanted to run a nightclub. What you do is you find a venue that you want to work at, and then you approach them to run your party. And the fact is, right, the people that run the actual venues, by the time you get to a point that you can probably afford that, to own a venue, right, and to do that, you might be too old and you might have actually lost touch with the scene. So what happens is those venue owners, they look for people like myself back then. They were kind of like, knew lots of people, were in some kind of scene, could access them and make your venue cool and get lots of people there. So what happens is I approach them, and how it works is the venue then, they provide the bar staff and the security, and they get all the money made off the bar. As me, I'm like a door promoter, right? And that means then I'd be running my events and I get the money off the ticket sales. So let's say 1,000 people come through at $10, that's like $10,000, right? But then from that, I've got to promote the event. So back then, taking out full page ads, which is about like, $800 or something, right? Back then. And then also provide all the DJs, but I was DJing myself as well. But then I had my friends with me and kind of like did that. But then, you build it from there. So that's how it works. But so I understand it from the DJ's point of view, but I also understand it from the promoter's point of view. And I'll be honest, when you're going for shows, you're going to be approaching the promoter. And I've mentioned this in some of my other free ones, but in my course, I go into this massively, and that is, how do you actually approach promoters? How do you talk to promoters? How do you work with them? Like, there's so much industry insights, and from running clubs, like that was back 1999, so that's over 20 years ago. And we recently did a 20-year anniversary party, right, for that first event that started, because that event ran every Friday. I was 7 years at that venue, but then another 5 at another venue. So that was 12 years. That was a big party, right? And we did a 20-year anniversary, and it was huge. Like, I sold so many tickets to that. But I've kind of pulled back from actually running clubs myself so much. Like I do in Sydney, I've got clubs that I'm affiliated with, that basically with my Sydney DJ school, my local project. And if you want to come to Sydney, sure, I'll give you shows, right? But then with that, I teach people how to DJ, and then I give them club shows, and I've got a lot of hookups in Sydney. But the thing is, in my course, I do break down actually how all the club scene works and give you like the roadmap to get in, because no one really knows how to talk to promoters. So I've got that experience. So I guess then that's me. Like, I was running clubs my whole life. I guess I was lucky to be able to do that. Like, it was very kind of enjoyable. I've been playing a lot, but now I guess now it's my time to pass the torch. Like, I've DJ'd and done all that, and I guess sort of I got tired, I guess. Like, I've moved into another thing. Now it's my turn to kind of share my knowledge with you guys and get you guys into the clubs. And I'll see it from Sydney. I'm seeing this all the time. A lot of my students are now dominating the club scene. Like, they're in there. People are like, oh my God, they don't expect them to be beginners. Even people like people who do the online course, right? They're usually actually better than the people that actually did the in-person training. Not that the in-person training is great, don't get me wrong, but the online course covers way more than we could cover in person. Like, like I mentioned in some of my other videos, I've added this advanced section to the online course where it's got like 30 advanced like tutorials, and that would equal like probably about 15 one-on-one classes. And the one-on classes about $100. So that's $1,500, right? But in that, I've done it way cheaper, under $20 or something, right? But to be honest, that means then people who have done the online course are turning up to play in the clubs. And not only are they killing it completely, but they know how to work with the venues. And by knowing how to work with the venues, see, no one knows that. That's the thing. People go in. They always mess up how to talk to the venues and how to talk to the promoters. There's definitely a way. So I explain all that. But anyway, yeah, that's kind of a bit of my backstory. So hopefully that's kind of interesting. So anyway, thanks guys. Thanks. I really appreciate your support with all of this. I really do.